Hello.
Hello, hello, Carlos. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2021 San Antonio Book Festival. I'm here with my dear friend, Carlos Maestas, entrepreneur, father, husband, storyteller, author. He's got it all. He does it all. And we're here talking about lessons in authentic storytelling. We're going to talk about Carlos's new book that came out very recently. What was it? Q4 of last year ish. Is that right? Yeah.
Yep. Well, it's
And
after right last summer. Last summer.
okay, last summer.
Right in the
And I'm
middle,
really
the perfect
right in the
time to
middle.
when no events are happening in person. Best time. Best time
Yeah,
right to launch your book.
yeah, that's all right. It's all good. I feel like it's that advice they give you where it's never a good time to have kids, there's never a good time to have married. You just got to do it right. Same thing with a book.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
having kids is also problematic during that time. So
yeah, yeah,
having
it's true.
homeschool.
You're right. No, you're right. Well, thanks for taking time. I know you're busy. I know you just got in from town from an engagement, you know. And I for those of you that are watching, I've used Carlos. I'm a proud promoter of his storytelling abilities and services. And so we're going to have a conversation. And everybody says that, but we mean it. We're actually going to do that. And I'm just really excited. I was honored when he asked me to do this. And so I want to start with sort of our history. And so for those of you that don't know, Carlos is the founder of a company called Key Ideas. And he's going to tell us a little bit about that. And in our journey, we met, he's a San Antonio native, so grew up here. Tell us a little bit about your family, Carlos.
Yeah, so I've lived in San Antonio for most of my life. I'm actually originally from Sacramento, California, and I moved here when I started high school. And so I love San Antonio. San Antonio is home. I love the opportunity to get to be a part of telling so many great stories, and there are great stories to tell here. And collaborating with you, I feel like was really um, one of the ways that started for us as a company was to be there at Geekdom kind of in the beginning. And Lorenzo is being modest about his bio, but he's done a lot of great things here in the city. Really was a CEO and started Geekdom, which is an incredible collaborative workspace, and has led to a lot of really great economic development for our city. An author of those books, I think I see behind you, strategically placed there, Cilantro Diaries, and The Rack We Built, and Tafolla Toro's, all which are great books. And so, yeah, I love being a part of this city. I feel like the book festival is another example of having a vision for something and wanting to create an experience for people in San Antonio and making it happen right downtown. And then just so honored to be a part of it.
Awesome, man. Well, I want to for the audience here to give them a little bit of sort of where our stories intersected. And we were both attending a church on the north side. It was back then it was called Bandera Road Community Church, and I remember watching a series of videos, and I remember thinking, man, these videos really make me cry. Like I love this place, but I'm like there's really strong. And I remember one you did about, it was a guy who had graduated from the food bank's culinary program, and he just told this crazy amazing story about how he had been addicted to crack, and how he had left his kid in the movie theater to go score, and he had been to jail and got out, and he was in this program, and it had changed his life, and it was just so powerful. And I thought, man, whoever is doing these videos is just on point. And then our church was going and doing a lot of mission work at the time, and they still do, in West Africa, in the country of Liberia, that had undergone a huge civil war. And I think it was around 2008-ish when you and I met on a trip there. And that's when I found out, oh, this is the Carlos that does all the videos. And it was just so cool. And so as a student of storytelling, I was very eager to pick your brain about this topic that I just love, that I don't consider myself an expert in. And so I just really, it was great meeting you. We had a lot of fun. There was, 100 inside jokes from that trip. And then what happened is when I got involved with Geekdom, I called, and I always love this story. I hope you'll indulge us and tell the audience about how when Geekdom first started, there weren't a lot of companies there. And so we called Carlos to tell him about it. And the price, the price was a little bit scary for him. Will you tell them that story? Because I think it's so awesome.
Yeah. So we first heard about Geekdom. I just fell in love with the idea and really with the ecosystem and the vision for the space. I had been, I wasn't a startup back then. In fact, I think it had been around for maybe almost 10 years as a company, but had evolved and built up a different kind of business line and sold that and was really focused on doing storytelling. But we were really small back then, and I was officing like so many others that you were trying to target, from coffee shops, from just a home office. I worked a lot with the church back then, so I would office there. So I really was just, I had my laptop and I didn't have a dedicated office. And so I think I was newly married also. And I remember having a conversation with Jennifer, and I was like, hey, I want to, sign up for Geekdom, but I don't know, it's like $50 a month. I'm not sure if I do that. And then it's like a dedicated office, I think was it like 200 back then or something? And so it was an investment in office space, and really the business took off from being a part of that ecosystem, and we grew to have a really large team. And every time Geekdom would move or have another floor, we would try to squat in the biggest office that we could, and then eventually led to buying a building downtown, and being still sort of an extension of all the companies that have come through there. But to that in itself is a story, and it I do remember really being stressed out about that commitment. But when you're surrounded by really good, talented people, and there's no shortage of great stories to tell, and so Geekdom's really been a huge part of our growth, and so many other companies that that I know.
So the reason I bring that story up is that, you said earlier when we'd met, you had been in the storytelling business for, 10 years already. And, this session is called Lessons in Authentic Storytelling. And I think what I love about that story is you've been doing it for a really long time. And so when we met, I was really eager to pick your brain and learn from you. And we did a lot of collaborations with Geekdom. And I just loved your approach. And so I want to dive into a couple of these things, because I want to give our audience, not the whole toolbox, but some tools, some ways of thinking as they approach storytelling, because I have found them to be really useful. And one of the things that I've learned from you, Carlos, is this notion that a lot of companies struggle with blurring the line between the company story and their own personal story. And will you just sort of, because I'm gonna go from there to the title, because I think it's where you practice what you preach. Right. And I think that it was something that really helped me redefine how I told my story. And it helps me when I advise other people.
Yeah, I think and this is in the book, but I think people struggle oftentimes with the idea of sharing their own story, because they think it's not worthy. They're not the Kardashians, and no one's keeping up with them, right? I used to, I like to joke sometimes, like my social media following is, more of a quorum, than a following, like the minimum amount of people that you get together. And so maybe that's, you feel that way. But there's also other reasons, other times it's because people have really hard stories, and they've experienced things that are really, really difficult, and they have a hard time being vulnerable enough to share those things. And I've had an opportunity now to interview thousands of people, and the one thing that is consistent with all of the folks that I've interviewed from very diverse backgrounds. This includes CEOs of companies, you know, billionaires to, you know, the people that we've met and become, you know, friends and family with in Liberia, Africa. You know, the thing that they all have in common is that they're using their story to make an impact on whatever organization it is that's sharing that story. And I think that oftentimes, you know, we don't see the value in our own personal connection to the work, or at least being active and sharing that story. And I think it's really, really important to do that, even if it means, I would say, especially if it means being vulnerable and sharing something that, you know, maybe a lot of people don't know. And so for me, you know, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about how that sort of worked out for me. But, you know, the reason that I was on that mission trip to Liberia, Africa, and doing that work with the church was because I had shared my story to a group of people that saw value in it, that saw an opportunity for growth and the opportunity for restoration, and really, you know, God's grace in that story. And so that to me is that's what makes some of the most powerful stories that we all know and love.
So I love that, and actually, it reminds me of, I was once talking to a woman, and I followed your advice that you had given me. She was doing a pitch to Techstars. She was applying for them, and she was doing this. It was like this technology she was building to help people buy gifts on registries that are relevant for people with kids. And she told the story about how she got a gift for her sister on the registry, built the thing, and it was the wrong size, or was it wrong, and she was, you know, and so she sent a picture to her sister, and her sister was the one that said, "Oh, that's the wrong size." And so I said, "Look, you need to tell that story in your pitch." She didn't want to tell it because she wanted to talk about techie stuff. And I said, "You need to tell that story. It's exactly the lesson that you're talking about here." And so she did it. She texted me the next day and said the whole room fell apart laughing in a good way, because it was her personal, and it really changed the way that I tell storytelling when you told me that, which was they want to hear it. Everyone thinks you have to tell the businessy part, but they want to hear the real story. So your book is titled "Mommy Lied to God," right? Authentic Lessons in Storytelling. And so I know that you've probably been asked 1,000 times about that, but I think your title is you following your own advice and right off the bat going in with something that is not only very personal, but sort of launches a story in the listener's mind that they need to know more about. What is this story? Will you tell our audience about that?
Yeah, it's funny because I remember you and I having this discussion about this title when you know I was pitching some ideas when we were talking about the book, and you're like, I don't know, people might get upset with that, and you know, and I understand why, but you know, obviously to me it was exactly what you're saying. You know, it was me taking my own advice, and it really wasn't even my advice. My background, I have a background in doing stand-up comedy, as you know, and so this was an advice that I got when I first started doing stand-up, and it was a friend of mine who he was a roommate. Actually, I had two roommates that were comics, which, you know, was fun. It was entertaining, you know, to have comic roommates. And I used to go see them perform at the club, and I always wanted to do that. And you know, one night I actually stayed up really late. I wrote a bunch of material, shared it with my friend, and he was like, "Oh, this is terrible." And I was like, "Okay, well, what happened? You know, why was it bad?" And I got my first lesson in writing stand-up comedy that day. And what he said is, you know, when you're writing comedy, write about yourself, because nobody has your story exactly. And you know, there's a lot of people that do topical humor, and you know, what ends up happening is that you're doing the same joke, right? There's some version of that same joke. But when you write about yourself, it's true to you, and it makes it more authentic. And so not only is there authenticity in it, but you know, when you deliver it, if it's rooted in truth, you're going to deliver it with just sort of a different energy, right? A different, swagger. And so that's what I did. And what was true to my story at that time, which was really hard, was that I was going through a really painful divorce. So this is not the marriage that I was talking about when I was saying I was newly married. This was my first marriage, and I was thinking, well, how the heck am I gonna write about something so personally painful and make it funny? But I that's what I did. I listened to Miguel and I started writing, and what came to mind was a punchline. It was, so I'm going through a divorce. I wanted to work things out, but her boyfriend wasn't willing to compromise. I'm like, come on, let me see her on Wednesdays and every other weekend. Let me get a month during the summer or something, trying to negotiate. And the hardest thing about being divorced is being a single dad. So any single dad will tell you, if your kid doesn't get what they want, automatically they start crying for their mom. And so I looked at my son, I said, okay, I know you miss your mommy, but mommy doesn't live here anymore. Like, why, Daddy? I was like, well, mommy and daddy stood up in front of a room full of all our friends and family, and mommy vowed before God to be with daddy till death do us part. See, daddy's still alive, honey. And that's right, mommy lied to God. And so that was the punchline. And I first of all, one little disclaimer: I never actually told my 5-year-old that his mommy lied to God. So that was not true. The divorce part was true, and it could have easily been called Daddy lied to God, but the punchline was Mommy lied to God. But here's what happened. I started writing material around that divorce, and that thing that differentiated me as a comic is also what connected me to the audience, because those who had been through a divorce were laughing the loudest. Those who had parents that were divorced or friends that were going through it, those were the ones that would come up to me after the show and say, hey, that was good. And so that's the thing about our story, is that's why I love storytelling, is it's the one thing that, when we do it right, it has the power to differentiate us, but even more than that, it connects us with people through shared experiences, or at the minimum, allowing them to know something about you that they didn't know before, and helping them, through whatever it is that you may be trying to guide them through. And so that's what it was about. So I quickly became known as the bitter divorce comic guy. Hopefully your shtick's a little more appealing than mine was, but it definitely worked. And so I thought to myself, well, when I write a book, the title's Mommy Lied to God. The book's really about life lessons and authentic storytelling, and it's kind of got a heavy, cover, but you can attest the book's pretty light, and it's funny. It's really not a lot of details about my divorce. It's the title, and I do think it's, I also thought I was doing a master class with Malcolm Gladwell, who's one of my favorite authors, and he says when he wanted to be a advertising copywriter, and he thinks of his book titles like, I need to think about the best ad copy that I can, so that you'd actually pull it off the shelf when you see it, and because you just have a very short amount of time. And so I thought it would be something that people would stop and be like, oh, really? Why did Mommy lie to God?
Yeah, it's catchy, and I do think that it launches a story, or at least the question of a story, right when you see it. But I also will attest, I read the book and I loved it, and I was laughing so much. It is very light, and there's a lot of your stand-up was working in there, and it was funny actually, as an author, I remember by page 30, I was a little bit jealous. I was like, why aren't I this funny in my books? I was a little bit I need to step up my funny game. And I really loved it. One of the things that I did love is it is very light, but it gives you a lot of great tools. You have the story, the famous story of Mr. Rogers, and how he did storytelling. I love that metaphor. When he went to Congress and gave his speech, and I wanted to see if you would talk a little bit about that, or the people that you look up to that have influenced you, that you study for storytelling, and why.
Yeah. So, I struggled with that first chapter, I remember, and I had I had so many stories. So the pressure when you write a book about storytelling is you want the stories you put in there to be good stories. If I had really terrible stories in my book about storytelling, then credibility lost totally. So that first, was really, it's the introduction. I believe I think it's not even chapter one; it's the intro. And I was flying to New York City for a project, and I happened to, it's a long flight, so I happened to see the documentary on Mr. Rogers, so I watched it, and it was fascinating to me, like what a great storyteller he was with like almost no budget, right? And I think it really rang true to me, because I feel like most of us are not Coca-Cola, or we're not Apple, we're not Elon Musk with billions of dollars where we can actually hire the best ad agencies to share our story. Most of us are closer to Mr. Rogers when it comes to how do we figure out a way to share our story in a way that's compelling, consistent, and I watched him a lot as a kid, but it took really seeking first to understand and listening to the backstory for me to really truly appreciate how brilliant he was, and how he was competing with Walt Disney. He's like competing with animated commercials, big Hollywood studios, and he was just like a PBS guy, like hanging out with like a little ragtag crew, and he did all the puppetry, and he wrote the songs, and he did and I think a lot of people listen and like, oh my gosh, this guy is like, he's so kind of monotone, and and he's probably not everybody's bag. But the other thing is, he was kind of hardcore, man. Like he like presented real hard stories and put them out in a kids show. He talked about the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. when it happened, and he presented it as like a topic that he was like helping kids deal with threats of nuclear war, guests that had disabilities, and having conversations with them so that kids could learn in an age appropriate way about real things, like and I just really appreciate that, because I think that kids are pretty intuitive, and they do pick up on things, and so I do feel like it was his way of being very authentic and staying true to things that were important to him, but through sharing other people's stories.
I love that story, and it is crazy when you think about it, for the depth of topics that you covered. I mean, that's not light stuff, and I think that it just shows you that if you do it correctly and you use the power of storytelling, it doesn't matter. You could take complicated issues and bring them and deliver them to the audience that you have. One of the questions that I've been wanting to ask you is because you work with a lot of companies, and I know that a lot of your work is with the nonprofit world, which I love, because these are people on very inspiring missions. They have something really burning in their heart that they want to do. What is one of the common mistakes that you see people make, or something that they should stay away from in the storytelling space?
So I think a few common things are the lack of consistency. They change their message every time their marketing person changes, or their CEO or their founder gets a new idea. I really see this in both nonprofit and for-profit world. Depending on how involved the owner or the decision maker is, they may get an idea, and then everything shifts because they have this
Yeah.
idea, instead of really being introspective and actually asking people that they serve, their customers or their potential funders, their whoever it is, you know, if it's a nonprofit, whoever it is that they're serving, you know, instead of like asking questions and really trying to figure out what is it about this organization that is so unique, that's so different. And then, you know, it's like I've heard you say this, like, you know, 1,000 times. It's like, what do you want to be famous for? You know, what's that thing that you want to be famous for? And so what happens is there's not synergy in their messaging. It's very inconsistent, and it actually you know, they lose credibility over time because you can't really figure out what it is they're trying to do, right? Like, and I mean, you know, it's one of those things that I do feel like you establish a message and you establish who you're for, and then you just own that. You know, like think about USAA and their messaging and clear what they're about and who they're for, and they have a lot of, you know, services, but you know, it's pretty consistent. Coca-Cola, you know, if you look at their branding, it had, you know, in 100 years, 150 years, it's like pretty consistent to like what they've actually established, and they're also like about, you know, harmony and the world, you know, like they're a global brand, and they're about harmony, you know, and polar bears for some reason, but you know that their messaging is pretty consistent, right? And so I do think that that's one thing. Another thing is that brands and companies try to make themselves the hero instead of the guide. And there's another really good book. After you buy my book, audience, if anyone's out there, there's a book called Story Brand, and it talks about this, and it's positioning. It's about, you know, how do you position yourself, and you know, too many times you go to a website or you see commercials, and you know, it's the company is trying to elevate themselves as like the hero or the star. In reality, the customer is the hero. You're helping them solve a problem. You know, you're the guide, and so and it's really broken down from like, you know, any screenplay or book, right? There's always the star of there's, you know, the main character, and they encounter some problem, and then there's a guide, there's another character that's sort of helping them, you know, solve that problem and you know, win the day, right? And so I think that companies oftentimes forget that, and what happens is that there becomes this disconnect. And I think, you know, like personal injury attorneys are really awful at doing this. Like they're like up, you know, they're riding on top of an 18-wheeler, or they're the strong, you know, there's obviously, like, I don't know who's having, I don't know who's sponsoring the book festival, so I'm not going to go into any specifics, but you know what I'm talking about. And it's in the book too. I write a little bit about that, and how it's like, I feel like all these personal injury attorneys like grew up watching wrestling, and they just like, you're like, that's how I'm gonna advertise. Like I'm gonna be Hulk Hogan, and that's what they do. And so I think that really your potential customers want to feel a connection, I think, to, you know, why you are the right person for whatever it might be, and they want to be the center of the attention. It shouldn't be about you. And I think that, you know, we sometimes forget that.
Yeah, I love that answer, and you know, just to add, because I think it's so true. One of my storytelling mentors, in addition to you, is a guy named Bill Schley, who's also one of your biggest fans. And he once told me, you know, to the whole changing your brands all the time, he said your brand is like a tree, and so many people cut them down before they ever grow and they ever, you know, bear any fruit. And he was just to stop cutting down your trees. And I just thought it was such a good visual of what companies do. Like, let it grow. Coca-Cola's tree is this beautiful evergreen. It's huge. It's this mighty oak, and because they let it grow. And the other thing, you know, Tim Keller is a guy that, you know, you and I both know out of New York, and I think he always said, you know, it's everyone wants to be Luke Skywalker, but really the guide is Gandalf. I mean, Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? You want to be Frodo, but really Gandalf is the guide. And I think that's really accurate, which is, and those are two of my favorite stories. And so a company really, the company is Obi-Wan, you're guiding. You're not Luke Skywalker. It's the customer. It's your audience. It's the reader. And I completely agree with what you're saying here. But it's hard because, you know, people want to bang their chest and say, but look how special my company is, or my nonprofit is. Look what we're doing. And it's just such a little thing that if you go too much, you fall into the trap, right?
Yeah, totally. It's easy to, and it's not that you shouldn't be proud of the work that you do, you know, but it's sometimes it's just a little too much. And I think it's just really evaluating, like, what do you really care about, you know? And you know, I think about the work that I do, and it's inherent in what we do because we're helping guide people through telling their stories. And I feel like, you know, it's a big reason why I wrote the book, and I'm excited that it's out in the world now, is because I don't feel like my legacy is going to be built around what I personally accomplish, but what I can help other people accomplish. And
Yeah.
And so there's my hope for this book is that somebody who reads it is thinking, I never really thought about my story in that way and didn't realize there was glory in my story and power in it, and that they decide to do something, and that has an impact on, you know, on a lot of people. And I think that, you know, to me, it's really, what are you really about as an organization? You know, what do you want to accomplish?
Yeah, I have two more questions, and we have a question from the audience that I want to go cover. But I'm very eager to get to these two because they're sort of my favorites. You know, you talked about something in your book about the importance of listening first. And when I first read it, I thought, oh man, yeah, this is what everybody says. And then as I read the book, I realized I'm actually really bad at it because I always want my desire to activate is so strong. And the story that you used about Diego Bernal was so powerful for me because there was no way to speed up what he did. And I wanted for you to just touch on that for our audience, you know, about listening. What's that principle? And if you want to give us a little, you know, the abridged or the unabridged version of that story.
Yeah. So the story with Diego, you know, is, for those of you, if you're tuning in locally, you probably know who he is. But he's a House of Representative. He's a representative for District 1, 2, 3, I believe. I could be wrong. Sorry.
Yeah.
Correct me.
Yeah.
But he was a product of the West Side. You know, well, I think you guys went to the same middle school. Went to Tafolla Middle School. And he really believed in the power of an education. You know, his mom's an educator. I think his, you know, dad might have been a migrant, you know, farm worker, and he understood what could change in somebody's life through an education. He went off to I believe Michigan State, and then got a law degree, and he came back, and when he was a freshman. He was just sort of newly elected. He wanted to do something around education, and really his big thing was education reform. And you know, like a politician running on an education platform is about as novel as like Mariah Carey showing up on your Christmas playlist, right? Like, it's, you know, people say that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I say either that or like a disappointed Dallas Cowboys. It's not that uncommon. But what was different is his approach to actually introducing legislation that eventually got passed. And what he decided to do is he decided to go to all of the schools and it's a very diverse district, including those schools on the West Side where he grew up. There's about 54, 55 schools that he visited, all the way to like Olmos Park and bordering, you know, Alamo Heights. So like very affluent parts of town as well. And what he thought is like, if I can hear these educators' stories and find some common problems, the chances are because my district's very diverse, that they also are going to be true throughout the state. And so he actually met with all of these school principals, and he had a very small staff, and he listened to their stories. And what he learned is the number one challenge, or one common challenge that happened throughout all of the schools, the ones that were in historically impoverished areas to the more affluent areas, is food insecurity was at the top, And so how can you get a kid to learn if they are malnourished? If they're coming to you after a weekend and they haven't eaten well, like how are you going to get them to absorb the knowledge? And so, he was really fascinated by that. And so I'll try to make this long story short, but what he did is, to add insult to injury, that the school lunch line, all of the food that was uneaten, because of overlapping district and state policies, they had to throw all of that food away. So, some answers to some of the problems, or at least I wouldn't say the solution, but a solution, was there in the school. And so what he did is he introduced the Fairness in Feeding Act and allowed these schools to set up these food pantries and on a share table. So if a kid was hungry, he could just pack up that food, put it in his bag, and take it home and eat. And that was incredible. And so now that is that law passed, and it exists throughout the state of Texas, which at the time was like the second most food insecure state in the entire country. And that never would have happened had he not taken the time to actually ask questions from the people doing the work. It never would have happened if the people doing the work wouldn't have actually shared those stories from their families and from the students that they work with every day. And so you never know when just the right story has an opportunity to change everything. And the next session, he was asked to be, you probably know all this, but he was asked to co-chair the education committee and introduced the school funding legislation that he wanted to introduce initially, and it had been shut down prior to him coming in, so that's why he decided not to do that. And it led to I don't have the exact number, but it was like it was millions. It was a lot of money. It was millions and millions of dollars that went back into the school system that didn't exist before.
I love that story, man, and I think that it's it hits home the principles, and I needed it too, because he did a really long listening tour, and this one story about food insecurity that he sort of wrote down, saw the pattern, and those stories ended up becoming a law that changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of students, and it just goes to show you it's not cliche. A well-told story and following the process can change lives, and it's just so cool. So we have about 8 minutes left in this session, and we have a question from the audience. Now that you're a famous #1 best-selling book author, is there any particular? The question is: are there any particular music that helps you get in the zone writing-wise? Tell us about the writing process.
Oh man, I'm very. My wife tells me I'm very melancholy, so it just depends. Like if I really want to write a sappy story, maybe I'll put Adele on. Because I just. Every time you're going to go there.
Yeah.
I actually, during writing this book, I think I probably listened to a lot of, just depending on the mood, maybe Tupac or or even Lauren Daigle, who has a really beautiful song. She's a Christian artist, beautiful voice, and I really feel like when I was writing this book, there were often times that I felt like I wasn't enough or worthy of writing the book, and that was really inspiring to me about listening to her songs. So I remember many times listening to Lauren Daigle throughout this, just to find the inspiration to continue. She's that song "You Say," And so that it was that. But yeah, I think it just depends on, you know, the mood, maybe Lumineers, you know, Beatles. So it just depends on what I'm going for. I wanted to also.
Yeah, go ahead.
So just as a recap, if I'm a video person, so what we would do is we would edit this, but this is live, so it doesn't work that way. But it led to 11.6 billion school finance reform. Diego Bernal injected 6.5 billion into Texas schools. So huge, and you know, one of the schools that he visited actually have a graphic of was school my wife was the principal at. And so I like to tease her that it's like the Jennifer Maestas bill. She didn't like that.
Well, she used your principles, and then she incepted the idea like Leonardo DiCaprio, you know, in his brain.
Totally, exactly. Yeah, it's all good. It didn't matter. It is what mattered right. Is that it stuck. But yeah, so what was the next question? Sorry, I wanted to make sure I felt like I was in the number.
No, we're high. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I have a ton. But one of the things that you brought up when we were chatting about this is, that and I love this. I just think we can end on this sort of grand level inspirational thing, is the power to start movements. How storytelling has been something that started movements, and I went. You spurred the idea, so I went and Googled the woman Susan Fowler who wrote the original post about Uber, and it was she was recapping the super strange, basically where she was getting sort of discriminated and bullied and all kinds of things, and that kicked off to me. I think was the precursor to the Me Too movement, but she just told her story in a really, really succinct way, and it kicked it off. And you don't think about that as being fueled by stories, but it absolutely is. You just end us on that, the power, the societal change that it can have.
Yeah. So one of my favorite quotes is from author named John Cotter in a book called Sense of Urgency, and he says, I'll just summarize the quote, but he said that Martin Luther King didn't address the civil rights issues during his day and start the movement that he started through sharing a PowerPoint presentation or a spreadsheet, right? What did he do? He told a story, and I think that was really powerful. Is that he was just an incredible orator, and he was able to tell stories to get people to connect to the movement that he was. And the quote was actually that he didn't announce on Washington Mall, "I have a strategic plan," right? It wasn't about his strategic plan. What did he say? He said, "I have a dream," and he painted a picture of what could be. And if you think of those movements like the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter movement, the Arab Spring, all of these things that have happened all around the world, they've existed through individuals sharing their story, and those stories connecting with people, and getting them to come out and share their story and join those movements. And when enough people share their stories and the right people listen, that's when things really change. And so that's what I believe storytelling has the power to do. And I think that the last chapter of the book is titled "Start Something You Can't Finish," and it's really we all heard growing up, like, you better not start that unless you finish it. You better not start that. You better be able to finish it. But real transformational work outlives us. You are a part of Geekdom. That will outlive you. The investments that are being made, in and around downtown, the investments that are being made in our students' lives through the educators that have dedicated their lives to doing it, foundations that are investing in that work, that's work that's going to outlive us. That's starting something that you can't finish. And so that's what I hope more than anything to encourage people to do through the book.
Awesome. We have another question from the audience that I wanted to ask, because I think we have enough time for it. It's Do you have any ideas about how audiences might change post-pandemic in terms of what type of story or themes might be most meaningful?
Well, I think, you know, the pandemic has hopefully enabled us to really get a glimpse into people's lives and be more empathetic and realize like we're all experiencing this at the same time, and there's an opportunity in that to see other people's humanity, to see, to check in with people that we care about. And so I think let's not miss the opportunity. This has been really a hard year for everyone in the world. It's been a crazy year, and I think if we look for silver linings in things, is that when you go through something like this, what it's really done, is it's highlighted a lot of the inequities that exist around the world and in our cities, and things that we need to address. And those are things we need to get laser focused about. And I hope that is something that comes from this post-pandemic time. I don't know about if that answers the question or about the themes, but one small example I can give you is when all of our students had to go to online learning, it really highlighted how many students in our city didn't have devices, didn't have access to internet, and that is something equity. That is equity. It is giving students, no matter where they live, an opportunity to log in and actually get educated or do research. And so, SAISD is one example. I'm on the board of SAISD Foundation, and they pivoted really quickly in what was a 5-year plan, and they turned it into like a 3 to 6 week plan to do one-to-one devices for all of their students. And they got that done. The community stepped up, raised the money to make that happen. And now what they want to work on is not stopping there, but actually getting fiber into those students' homes, not just the hot spots, but actually getting them connected, and they're working with the city on making it happen. So there are always tremendous opportunities when we experience something crazy in our lives, and I hope that more people will really laser focus on those things that are opportunities for us to serve and be better, and less on all of those things that divide us politically or whatever it might be. And I hope that we can come together and just make our cities better.
Carlos, thank you. I'm gonna bring us to a close, but I wanted to make one comment before I did. There, Ronnie, who's in our audience, said that Ronnie was one of the schools that Diego came and spoke to, and so I just think it's such a great example of schools using their story, and it actually matters, and that stories really matter, and they can affect change. So thank you for highlighting that example of how even in education and even politicians that have a sort of reputation for not always delivering can deliver through storytelling. We're going to bring this to thank you for your time. Will you just tell the audience in closing the name of your book, where to get it, how to find out more about your company, and then we'll sign off.
So the name of the book is Mommy Lied to God, Life Lessons in Authentic Storytelling. The book festival has a store where the book is on sale, and if you're connected to this, you're likely connected to the store. So I would say start there with the book festival. But if for whatever reason you missed that, it's available on Amazon. It quickly, within that first week, became an Amazon bestseller in multiple categories, which was really exciting to see. For like 5 seconds, my book was in front of Malcolm Gladwell's, one of his books.
Yes.
And then the universe corrected itself, and it was like, dude, what? And so then I don't know, something happened, and it just now it's not. But anyway, so yeah, you can buy it there on Amazon or through the bookstore. It's also at the Twig. Shout out to the Twig bookshop for carrying our books. And my company is keyideas.net. And so you can find me there. You can kind of learn a little more about the work that we do. I'm on all of the things. I'm in LinkedIn. It's just CarlosMaestas. My Instagram's Insta Carlos M. Our company's at Key Ideas Inc. So any of those things, easy to find. And yeah, I hope that that if you do buy the book, you'll find it a worthy investment.
Carlos, thank you for your time and sharing this valuable insight. I want to thank all of our attendees for taking time out of their schedule to tune in. Appreciate it. And I also want to thank, last but not least, the San Antonio Book Festival for putting this together and for really helping to sort of usher in this new awesome era of reading lots of books in our community. And so I'm so thankful. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everybody who tuned in. Thank you, Book Festival. Thanks, Lorenzo, for taking the time to do this. Go buy Lorenzo's books. They're
buy Carlos first. Buy his first, and then mine. All right, everyone. Take care.
Bye, guys.